Alec Zammitt, welcome into the weeds, brother. Fantastic to have you on what is going to be our very first episode of Into the Weeds. You're a dyed-in-the-wool activist, collaborator in the cannabis and other spaces. Mate, thanks for taking the time to join me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, mate. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Mate, you're like well known in Western Sydney and in the cannabis community as an activist, an artist. Mate, how did you become such a big troublemaker? Where did it come from?
Try not to cause too much trouble, but I guess it started in the early days. I was a graffiti artist and a graffiti writer. So I loved getting my name up. I loved the attention. I loved the adrenaline that came with it. That was probably my strong suit than the art style of art and the art skill. But over the years, I honed that in. I started working with guerrilla marketing agencies and companies like that, doing marketing and brand activations, and just a way to keep doing what I knew and where my skill set was, but to earn a living off it. And then, yeah, as that grew from the guerrilla marketing, it sort of led into publicity. And over more than the past decade, I learnt a lot about publicity and getting things on the news, and everything that goes with that, hand in hand, I guess, with the guerrilla marketing and PR work. And then, I started applying it to something that I felt strongly about and something that I felt was important. And then things, I guess, just snowballed from there.
And that was cannabis. You got involved in the cannabis community.
Yeah.
And applied your skill set, which is pretty phenomenal, about, turning sort of nothing into national news, but you got involved in cannabis.
Yeah, so cannabis was a big...
Why were you passionate about it?
It was a big aid for me growing up as a youngster. It kept me off... I guess if I didn't have cannabis, I potentially would have had to be prescribed pharmaceutical medication, I guess just to slow me down and level me out a little bit, and cannabis seemed to do that for me, and it was more of a natural medicine. So I found that through the black market. It seemed to be a really good aid for me. It seemed to help me a lot and enabled me to continue doing day-to-day tasks and I guess just working hard and at my professional goals. And I just didn't agree with the fact that I was classed as a criminal because I consumed it. So I wanted to do something about that.
Well, good on you, and you certainly have done that, mate. You've been a leader in the community for a long time. But tell us, you're from Western Sydney. You're out Greystanes.
Yeah.
And you're a proud Westie. You're a proud Sydney fella. Tell us about cannabis out in Western Sydney. Like, where's it grown? Tell us a little bit about how does cannabis work in Western Sydney?
I guess it's all pretty much all hydroponic. So unlike some of the rural areas, pretty much everything you're getting is hydro. I feel like it's good weed. Even all the street stuff, for the most part, it's all pretty good.
It's all like being grown indoor, probably in Western Sydney.
I feel like a lot of it is locally produced.
Yep.
And it's everywhere, especially as a young'un growing up there. It's in all the different sort of niches and styles of people, and it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
As I've got older, it's not just the young'uns. It's everyone smokes it.
And across across different like countercultures and cultures. So if you're a goth or a metalhead or a bogan, or you're in what about different different communities like Islander communities, that sort of thing? Is it prevalent?
Yeah, 100%. It's I guess that's the one thing that brings everyone together and that everyone seems to have in common. But throughout all the different cultures, whether it's secular or normal culture, everyone seems to consume.
And I've heard that a lot of it's done. A lot of the growing's done by the Vietnamese. Particularly good growers. Certainly fantastic veggie growers and massive farmers out in that area, and they're lending their skills to that. I'm led to believe.
Look, potentially, I think a lot of people sort of if they don't like a bud or if they're trying to put it down, they call it Asian. But that's probably a bit unfounded as to the origins
It's
of it.
not a good quality. You know, they're just churning it out, and it's not the best bud.
Well, I'm not saying that they don't grow good bud. I think that just the word Asian gets used synonymously with bad bud, and it's maybe just a stereotype that whether truly or not untruly has become prevalent. And I think that dates back to, I guess, where it was more illegal and we didn't have the medicinal market sort of keeping the quality up or trying to push the quality up. And yeah, where it was more focused and I guess like organised crime and different groups that are just focusing on quantity over quality. So they were putting PGRs into their buds. So often something with PGR would just get classed as
PGR,
Asian.
what's that for the...
Plant growth regulator. So
Yep.
I believe it's something that's usually used in, for example, growing roses so that they can keep them more uniform and make more dense product. And then that sort of got shipped over and started getting used in cannabis as a way to increase the yields and not necessarily give you as high of quality of bud.
That's really interesting. So because it's the black market, there's this PGR, plant growth regulator, coming into the product, into the market, and that's really interesting. It's another argument for legalisation to make sure that that there's some regulation and oversight of what's ending up in the herb. What about how it's like? I'm not asking you to name names and places and stuff, but how does pot, like for a lot of people, no one really knows how sort of pot works on the street. Is pot a big part, weed a big part of the economy out in Western Sydney?
I think it's a part of all economies, especially throughout Sydney. But yeah, it's I guess it's readily available. There's a lot of people supplying it. There's a lot of people consuming it, and whenever there's demand, there's supply. So yeah, I would say, I guess there is a big economy for cannabis. Whether it's all a part of the general economy, I don't really have much comment on, but there definitely is an economy for it, and I'd say that's throughout Sydney.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, cannabis was helping you, big part of the community. It's pervasive and all the rest. And you got the shits because you didn't like being called a criminal. So you've taken matters into your own hands with you and your crew, and there's a pretty big crew of guys and girls, involved in this space. And you've done some pretty massive actions, haven't you? Hey, Pete, let's bring one up. Let's bring up Alec's work. Well, let's do the Smash Up Derby because we just got to. It's just hilarious. Play the Smash Up. So why were you doing this? Why were you doing the demolition derby?
Like I said earlier, I love adrenaline. I love, I don't know, this just seems so fun. I even love watching it back like this. It's something my dad and I got into when I was young. So he's a tow truck driver. He helps me collect scrap cars and bring them home. And then together we strip them, put in a little bit of a roll cage, which is not much of a roll cage. It's pretty much a bar from left to right and one from the floor to the roof behind the driver's seat in case I roll. But yeah, just I guess what kid doesn't like just smashing things up and a bit of destruction? And
No way. So this is a family hobby.
Yeah. My dad's done one with me in the past, but he's got a bad back, so he's I guess he's pretty keen. He wants to get out there, but he doesn't want to feel it the next day.
What engine have you got in that? Is it just any old engine, just any old
Yeah,
something that'll run?
Yeah.
You don't soup it up or anything like that. It's you just got to try and keep the engine going for as long as possible in this thing.
Yeah, there's little tricks you do, like you move all the main wiring harnesses out of the front and try and get them away from impact zones. On automatic cars, you yeah, this one I get a few cars in a row.
You just cleaned up.
They're only little hits, those ones. They're just bumps. But yeah, I was just trying to stay around the edge of the track so I didn't get trapped and my bonnet was sort of facing out. So the idea with this is you reverse into other cars' motors and try and disable their car. So the last car standing is deemed the winner. So you want to protect your engine so you can keep going, even if for the most part I get front wheel drive. So with all those back hits, the rear wheels usually lock up and
You're going good. Like, you haven't been hit yet.
Yeah, no, this was a pretty good run. So right here now, the guy's already been knocked out and they've thrown a red light, and so every car's meant to stop as soon as there's a red light. So if someone's injured, obviously driver's safety is paramount. Yeah, this is what happened while I'm over there. And then, so the guy's like fully knocked out there just behind our window.
Is that a guy on the ground?
No, not on the ground. It's a driver. So he's sitting in the driver's seat.
He's knocked out.
Yeah. So
what?
Even one of my early ones, I had a big hit, and you're wearing like a full face helmet, obviously, while you do this. But my head smashed up against the B pillar, and I saw a flash of light for a second, and I don't think I was knocked out at all. I'm pretty sure I was straight back to it, but. Yeah, this guy had, I guess, a similar hit, and his head must have bumped something too hard, and even though he's wearing a helmet, it's KO'd him. And so we've all pulled up there, and that's why I had my hands up just in that last shot, telling the guy to stop, because he was just gunning for me. He obviously hadn't seen the red light. I should have just reversed out the way, but when there's a red light, you want to be careful, because everyone's usually running in, or there's potentially a fire happening or something. You don't want to crash into the fire truck or run someone over.
Wow. People really get, like, they get worked over. And how did you go in this?
That one, I don't remember what I came. I didn't place in the top 3. But yeah, I think I did pretty well in that one. I mean, I was happy with my effort. So I try to drive hard. Some drivers, I guess, take it a bit easy until a few of the cars are knocked out.
They're sneaking around. You just go for it from the outset.
Yeah, that's just go for it, because otherwise you might get knocked out and you've not done much. Like, I'm there for the impact. So yeah.
Excellent, mate. That's good to see. And you're making an impact. There's no doubt about that. And like that effort there. What was that in aid of? You're the Craze Collective. So you get out, you do all these events, and one of them, Smash Up Derby. Was that for any particular cause? Well, you didn't have a cannabis leaf on the bonnet or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's I guess with my activism, I'm trying to make change in the legislation and that kind of stuff. I guess they're more family events. What I try not to do with the activism and the content we make is I try not to bring it in front of kids or to encourage people who aren't necessarily smoking to take it up.
Yep, good point. Good point.
So for me, all of the activism is about ensuring that people who are consuming aren't. It seems like all the negatives that come from consuming cannabis are all related to the legislation, and not necessarily to the act of actually consuming cannabis. And so that there is what I've been trying to fix. And so I don't.
Well, that's responsible adult use, and just liberty, freedom. People who want to use cannabis, adults, do it in a responsible way, and we educate each other about what responsible use looks like, and all the sophisticated parts of cannabis use and cannabis culture, and misuse 100%. Too. So we educate about because I know you're having a spell from cannabis at the moment. So you're saving for a house, and you thought I've been smoking, now I'm not, but you're still an advocate for the cause, but you're just managing its consumption like anything else you do.
It's not for everyone, and I guess for myself personally, I felt it was helping me in the earlier years, and I guess now that I'm getting older, doesn't necessarily seem to help as much. So I'm on a break for it. I've been on a break for quite a while now. When I say a break, I'll have one every now and again. But yeah, for the most part, not really consuming at all, and it's been quite a while. But still a fierce advocate for the cause and to get things, I guess, finished once and for all in terms of the legislation.
Yep, let's get into that, because you've done you've really put your life on the line for these things. Like, I think the last time I saw you, we were in court. You were going to jail. You weren't going. I don't know if you were facing jail, but you're in trouble. You were in the local court. And I was down there, supporting, standing with you. But you and Will managed. Well, talk us through how you ended up in court and what you were up to.
So I guess we, as part of our annual traditional 420 activations, we ended up projecting onto the Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Due to the Opera House projections, no one seemed to have a problem with the Harbour Bridge projections, but after the Opera House projections, we were in a hotel room opposite the Sydney Harbour and opposite the Opera House. The police came and raided it. They wouldn't leave, basically. They knew who they wanted. They already had a profile, and they wanted Will and I. So they wouldn't go until we confessed to projecting on the Opera House and saying, yeah, we did it. Oh, sorry. They ended up taking us back to some remand. I don't know where it was. They gave us, they verbally told us they were going to give us pretty lenient bail restrictions and send us out on bail. We said, yeah, cool. They ended up writing it out and bringing it out to us to sign, and it was totally different to what they had verbally said. So they were putting very heavy restrictions on us and as part of our bail conditions. I said to them, no, I'm not signing that. It's going to impose on my work. It's going to impose on my day-to-day life. Tried to reason with the officers. They weren't having any of it. So Will ended up signing his and he got out. I think he was held for about 6 hours. They ended up taking me off to holding cells and wanted to put me before a judge. So I ended up spending maybe a day and a half or up to maybe 20 hours, I think, in holding in total. This whole time, I forgot to take a jumper to the hotel when we went there to do this activation. So I ended up having the bathrobe from the hotel on as my jacket. So they've taken me to the holding cells and I'm still in a bathrobe.
You're in jail.
Yeah. And then
He's in dressing gown.
Yeah, and then they take me before video link to see the judge. And so my girl at the time, she's ran off and...
In the dressing gown?
Yeah, in the dressing gown. I'm on the audio video link talking to the judge in a bloody bathrobe. So my girl went and found Mark Davis, my lawyer at the time. Who
He's
I was
a heavy
working
hitter
with.
too.
Yeah, and he's pretty cool. Yeah. He seems to know what he's doing.
Yeah.
So he went. He was on his day off. He's come into the court. He's in jeans and just his casual attire. He's come in. I'm there on video link in my bathrobe, and the judge basically struck off most of the bail conditions. So I was still on bail, but I had pretty much no conditions. So Will, because he signed his early, he had to go check in at the police station like every other day, and he wasn't allowed in the city, and there was heaps of other stuff. He and I weren't allowed to talk with each other.
Really?
Yeah.
No consorting, no getting together, no causing trouble.
Yeah. That's I think that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, so then, Mark ended up taking that to court and having his bail conditions adjusted a few months later.
Yep.
But in the end, we were on bail for, I think, 2 years in total, or maybe just over or just under. And then, we went to court for it. We won, so the case was dropped and the prosecution withdrew from the matter. Then we requested our legal fees back, which we got, I think, maybe 75% of it back. And it was a good time. Yeah,
full victory. Well done for you, and really flying the flag. Pete, have you got the we've got the footage? So because we've got to track back here, because what you did was hire out the hotel room, and then someone's projecting. Here we are. The blinds are going up, projecting across the harbour. 420. Cannabis culture, like weed leaves, all kinds of things on the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. Global icons lit up for the cause.
Yeah, so it said, "Who are we hurting?"
Who are we hurting? Yeah, so let's talk about that, because that's been your campaign theme. Who are we hurting? Talk us through what that messaging's about.
Well, that first came about when back at one of the early activations that we did, which was, just to begin with this, so there's multiple teams set up throughout the harbour with the projectors pointed from different directions in order to get the sails and the bridge. Clever. So just one of them was coming from the balcony of the hotel.
Yep.
The rest were in a few other positions. Huge thanks to everyone that's ever helped along the way and who's going to help in the future. We definitely can't get all this done without a team of support, and very grateful for everyone who gets on board.
Yeah, but who are we hurting? So you've got the weed leaf waving around there on the opera house.
Dancing weed leaf.
Dancing weed leaf. And the who are we hurting? What does it mean?
So I guess it's just self-titled. So who are we hurting? Who are we actually impacting? I mean, a lot of the defence for not changing legislation, I guess, driving laws aside, because that's a bit of a different discussion. But a lot of the objectives to legalising it are talking about people's health and safety, and really that's just referring back to the consumer themselves. And if we legalised it and had the right regulation and education in place, that would probably be minimised. It seems like most of the harms that come to the consumer is caused by the law itself. So if we eliminate that factor, we're eliminating potentially 90% of the negatives that are associated with consuming cannabis.
Yeah, so you're a responsible adult. You consume, cannabis in a way, and you want to moderate your use in a responsible way. There's no one else you're really hurting. The impact really is in the fact that you the criminality that comes with it, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The cost of that to society, and also you're feeding your money, because you've got to buy, if you're not growing this stuff, you've got to feed to the black market and to people who might not be the best people to be running this business, and running this industry. And so that's a really, really strong message, and it resonated well.
And I don't believe cannabis is a gateway.
So what do we got there? That's the Sydney Harbour Bridge. That looks great, and the 420.
Bridge, yeah.
The pylon,
yeah.
That's massive too. Like if that plinth there, that column there on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, that must be like 50, 60 metres high. It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Look at that. That's that is so good. So good. So this is from a few years ago. This is about 2.5 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. 420, look at that one.
And the Who Are We Hurting title, so that initially came about, we were already doing, cannabis activations and similar protests to what you see here.
Yep.
And we leased a shop in King's Cross on
walk us through
William
that.
Street.
So King's Cross, Sin City, William Street. Yeah, there was an empty shop.
Just down from the Coke sign.
Just down from the big Coke.
Yeah.
But what did you do?
So we leased an empty shop front. We spoke with the real estate agent, said, look, we just want a short-term lease, a couple of weeks. We're going to put some artworks in the shop, in the window. It'll be unstaffed, and if anyone wants to purchase the artworks or inquire, we'll have some contact details on the window.
Clever.
They were happy enough to do it. The
to begin with.
Yeah, well, the cross was dead at that point, really.
Yep.
So there'd been so much alcohol-fueled violence and I guess other issues that they had reduced all the trading hours for the shops and the businesses in the area, I believe. The whole nightlife there had just died out and gone. So leasing commercial real estate was very hard, and I guess the real estate agent was quite happy to get a little bit of return from it, even if it was only for a few weeks. So yeah, we leased that out. We set up the plants overnight with some hydroponic lights all hanging down from the ceiling.
So you made it look like an indoor grow.
Yeah, basically, with no covers on the window.
But just like out in the open on William Street. Hundreds of thousands of people going past, and the cops.
Yeah. And so, it didn't take long. We set it up the night before, maybe a couple hours after sunrise. We had a load of police out the front. We had all these different news stations and media channels there with their cameras. A reporter came. So the whole time I had no sleep that night, and from setting it all up, I was parked across the road, and I see sort of the crowd getting bigger and bigger as the sun rose. And then eventually the real estate agent rang me. I saw the real estate agent turn up. Then eventually he rang me. He said, mate, we need a key holder here, yada, yada. He didn't tell me what was going on, and he didn't know I was sitting there watching it. And so he's got the cops and the media all standing around him. The cops telling him to call. He's like, yeah, mate, we just got to get a key holder here. So the police are requesting access. And he didn't make it sound too dramatic. So I had to wait for the videographer to return to get back. So we had worked all night. There was videographers were changing shift. I waited for him to get back. He ended up coming back, or a different videographer turned up. So then we walked over. There's another video of all this happening, but yeah, basically I opened up, unlocked for them. They went through, they checked out every plant, make sure we didn't have any sneaky real ones hiding in amongst them.
Here's one here. Here's one of the...
Yeah, so, and this is also how all the fake cannabis prop stuff started. So after doing that shop front, we had a few producers for film and television shows reach out to us and want to use the prop plants in their...
It's a handy little business, hiring out fake dope plants.
Yeah, no, it's and then so yeah, I guess with that we just had the bunch that we used for that activation on hand. We ended up making a heap more. We made a lot bigger ones. We honed in our arts and crafts skills and started making the buds and all different other elements. Along the way now, it's been quite some time that we've been doing the like set design and prop hire for these film and television productions. So along the way, we got federal approval to import a pill press, and so now we can make custom non-active pills and prop pills and all that kind of stuff. So we did like pills for underbelly with a custom face. We've done the plants and buds for Foxtel. Foxtel was High Country, which we did not too long ago. That was filmed in Melbourne. We've done Netflix like Clickbait. We've did what's the name? Under Investigation by Liz Hayes. I think that was Channel 9. But yeah, we've had productions on every single network, and as well as international productions. We did. I forgot his name as well. I'm not the best with names. There's a show called Wizards with Pete Davidson, movie. And so that actually hasn't come out yet. That was filmed in Queensland. We did all the buds for that. And yeah, Pete said they were incredible. He really liked them.
The fake buds.
Yeah, fake buds.
Fake buds.
Just
Pete Davidson.
Yeah.
Right, look out for that. Wizards.
Yeah, that'll be out eventually, I believe.
So how many fake plants have you got? Like 50 or...
Oh, no, we got loads. So I've got like we had a whole factory running at one point where we had all our merch products and all the props and everything stored, and we'd do our dispatch and some of the manufacture there, as well as landing the stuff that we import and the stuff we manufacture offshore. But yeah, now I've tried to condense it a bit. So I've got a big garage full of different props and that now. Yeah.
Just of fake drug, like merch and props and
primarily the drugs.
Like pill press with like what were on the pills, like little
smiley face.
Smiley face.
Yeah. They wanted it a specific colour and the specific logo, and it was based on documentation of crimes that they were reenacting.
Wow.
They wanted to match.
You'll have to get like a little gummy mould or something like that. Make your own Crazeco gummies. Who knew that it was such a massive industry? But it's there you go. It's like in all of this popular culture, news, documentaries, movies, weeds everywhere. Yep. And there's a business in hiring out. And we took one of these weed plants into Parliament. I've got this in Parliament House full time. When it's not here, it's over at Parliament House, and people walk in my office. So ministers and other people walk in, and I've got a weed plant. Yeah. And a mobile and a bong and the whole thing, and they go, "Oh, is it real?" And I say, "Yes," and they go, "Oh."
I'll get you another one so you don't have to card them between. You can have one for you.
We need more. We need as many as possible here on Into the Weeds. And we saw before you're just doing parkour. You had like people parkouring around Sydney, leaving weed plants in strategic locations as part of a massive guerrilla campaign, guerrilla movement, and you're attracting the press. You're getting that free press. You're getting the story out there, and there's a long tradition in activism of sort of prankster, and like that's a really powerful way to get your message across, isn't it? Satire, pranking the cops. It's hilarious.
Yeah, all a bit of fun. It's all Aussie larrikinism, and I guess have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, but it landed you on bail for 2.5 years, and you're facing some pretty hefty fines too, weren't you?
Kind of. So the way they brought it about, it was just meant to be a fine, which I think would have been a few $100 for each for Will and I. So we're each facing a fine. the way the police brought it about was that they made it a court attendance notice instead of just an on-the-spot fine. So they do have the power to do that, but usually especially for what this was, which the fine or the charge was distribution of advertisement on Opera House premises. I guess that usually relates to people handing out pamphlets and flyers, which usually they'll just come down and say, get on going, we don't want this happening here. Or if worse comes to worse and they persist, they'll just give them an on-the-spot fine. The police ended up getting someone that was like the leader of the protest task force and protest division, who really wanted to impact, I guess, what Will and I do, and to maybe put a stop to it or to have us think twice before doing more. And so he brought it about it in the most aggressive way that he could.
Yeah, right.
Which was a court attendance notice, which was the bail restrictions. So I think at the end of the day, they sort of achieved what they set out to. I don't know if they ever actually intended on pursuing the charges, or if the whole goal was maybe they thought they were going to win. But I think a lot of the goal was more to have us on bail, drag that out as long as possible. And then even if they had to withdraw at the end, they've caused that inconvenience for that amount of time.
Yeah, well, I know it's not going to like they've really tried to bully you and clamp down on you, the cops, and clearly hasn't worked, and more strength to your arm. And it's part of a massive, long movement we've had in Australia, around the world, around cannabis, isn't it? Like, I was giving a talk the other day about cannabis activism, how it really came up in the 60s and 70s. And in Australia, we've got a big, long history of that cannabis activism, of people getting out there, being creative through arts and installation, music and all the rest. And you're just the latest iteration of it. But it's,
definitely. So one of my big influences is, I guess, some of the legalised cannabis's heritage, with being the hemp party and the hemp embassy up in Nimbin, and they got that big joint that they take around different places and inflate, and they once had it on the harbour on top of a ferry or a boat or whatever it was, and cruising around the harbour back in the early days. And I guess back in those days, there was even the stigma associated with cannabis was even worse, and it was maybe a lot more shocking than anything we do today. I mean, pretty much you don't ever meet a naysayer. Everyone you meet sort of supports legalization, whether they consume or not. They know someone that uses it medicinally and sees benefit from it, or they know someone that's been impacted by the legislation itself and nothing else surrounding their cannabis use. So yeah, these days you don't really meet anyone with a negative sort of approach to it, unless they have some sort of financial interest in the other side, whether that be political or direct money in their pocket.
Yeah. And it's a good point. And one of the big campaigns that I know on my first day in Parliament, you guys, I got the full treatment. You guys loaded up. It was like 4:00 in the morning. We had, what did we have? We had armoured personnel carriers, tanks, stretch limos, and we basically went on a
little parade.
A parade. It felt like we were like driving into Baghdad. We were at all the TV stations, drove around Sydney. To my dying day, you, like, with your whole torso out of the armoured personnel carrier. Yeah. In my mind, you were wearing a helmet. Were you wearing a helmet? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I might have had one.
I think you might have had the old like Marine GI
just
helmet,
hard hat
with the straps off, camo. We'll have to bring up, while I'm gibbering.
Yeah, over the Harbour Bridge.
We'll have to bring that up, Pete, later on. But the over the Harbour Bridge, dropping me off at Parliament House. Yeah. Like, did you get in trouble for that?
No. So pretty much everything we do, we check the legislation, if there is any applicable legislation prior. Yep. So even with the Opera House projections, we had advice from a legal team that we weren't breaking any legislation prior to doing it. The armoured personnel carriers and the convoy we did, so that was why, while Will and I were still on bail, so we obviously didn't want to breach any bail and potentially be locked up for a few days until we could get before a judge again. But yeah, so Will and I were still on bail. All we did, we hired the army vehicles, hired the limo, and drove on legal streets. So the army personnel carriers had road permits. They were allowed to go where they went. All the other vehicles had standard registrations. So they're allowed to drive anywhere on a public road.
And it looked awesome, and it was freaking everyone out. People were just like in the
What is
CBD.
going on?
They honestly thought they were under assault because there was all these maniacs hanging out of tanks rolling through the city, and the message
Might be down.
Yeah, the message. The message we were, that was the first day, but the message we were taking out there was to do with roadside drug testing.
Yeah, so the title of that was Driving with THC Shouldn't Make You an Enemy.
That's right.
And
So again, who are we hurting? Driving with THC, medicinal cannabis prescription. What's the issue? What's going on?
100%, yeah. So they're, the safety stats that they use to say, I guess to defend the legislation that's currently in place, don't really back up much. A lot of it is flawed, so I don't know 100%. Sorry, just if you go down further, I don't know if it's in this post. Just look up driving with THC. It'll be, I think, the day before that.
Yeah, so the issue is in New South Wales and in I think every state and territory in Australia apart from Tasmania, if you're a medicinal cannabis patient and you take your cannabis according to your doctor's instructions, you can be pulled up at a roadside drug test, given the tongue scrape, and what happens?
So depending on which state you're in, there's different punishments and a bit of a different process, but basically they'll give you a roadside drug test. If you come up positive for that, you're banned from driving for 24 hours. I think that's pretty much the standard throughout.
And it's just a positive test. It's just like any amount there. It's not like you got to have a lot or a little, any amount, isn't it? And it's not, you could be unimpaired. It could have been you had it 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago, and it turns up.
Yeah, so they're not testing for impairment and they're not testing for, levels of consumption. They're simply testing for the presence of it being there. So depending on your metabolism and your body and how much you've consumed and how long ago it was, it could stay in your system for a different period of time for different people. So doctors can't really give you any clear advice on when you can legally drive after consumption. I guess it's all sort of just left up to the consumer themselves.
But that's the case. That's the case with all medicines, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
If you have codeine or some opiate or an antidepressant or something like that, if you have that, the doctor says, and society says, if you don't feel well, you don't feel together, then don't drive.
Yeah, all of that medication contains the warning on it that don't drive while under the influence of it.
Yep.
But none of that medication is tested for on roadside drug tests.
That's right. Cannabis is the only one.
Cannabis is the only prescription medicine that's treated in this way, yeah. And so I guess that has a lot of unintended consequences. At one point when I wasn't consuming, I was still intimate with my partner who was prescribed and consuming. I ended up testing positive on a roadside test. After I went through the process of all that in the prosecution, I ended up receiving a no conviction, and I owned a private security company at the time. The police then took that no conviction into account and revoked my master security licenses. So at the time, I was working as a publicist, and I just employed security guard staff to look after the private security firm. And then the master licenses are what enable me to employ licensed security officers. So from the day that they revoked that, I basically had to cease trading of the company. All the employees I had basically found themselves without a job because we weren't able to service the contracts we had.
So not only that conviction that for the road at the roadside,
was a no conviction.
It was a no conviction.
Yeah.
Even that flowed through to basically wrecking your business and your licenses in another area.
Yeah, 100%. And
That's just
I
wrong.
guess the people that were primarily impacted by that were my employees, not even myself. I was working in another industry at the time, and it came down to, I guess, just the fact that policies and legislation hasn't quite caught up with the fact that it's now prescribed. So they said that in the policy for having a security license and a master security license, you can't have any drug-related, illicit drug-related convictions or no convictions. So they still look at that for the security industry. And then so...
It's just a crazy situation because I've read the legislation and it actually says it calls it a prescribed illicit drug.
Yeah.
So it's prescribed.
No, but prescribed in that scenario, I think, relates to being on a list of different illicit drugs.
Yep.
And that list there, it doesn't necessarily mean prescribed by a doctor. It just means that if it's on that list in a Appendix D or whatever it is they call it, there's a list of different substances. There's no differentiation between or no exceptions for medicinal cannabis. So at worst case scenario, I was prescribed at the time but not consuming, and I believe the positive test was due to being intimate with my partner who was consuming, because they're not...
So you just had a really big pash.
Yeah.
And then, like...
It was on my saliva,
On
and
your
then the saliva tested positive. So they're not doing blood tests or anything like that.
Yeah. And they're not testing for how much THC's in your system.
Yeah.
And they still have a test for impairment too. So if you turn up and you're like drooling and your eyes are all red and you know you can't, you look, like you're uncoordinated, you're not responsive to questions, they can still charge you with like basically driving under the influence
or driving whilst impaired.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Driving while impaired, but they're not even doing that. They're basically just saying, oh, there's some there. Even if it's legal drug, you lose your license and potentially your business as well. Crazy situation.
Yeah. There's a lot of intended and unintended consequences that come with it. But yeah, there's for the most part no allowance for the fact that there's medicinal. Like you said, they've got that availability to test or to conduct investigations relating to impairment, which is what they do for these other medications. I mean, obviously, any police officer doesn't want someone driving around impaired, so even if they're consuming...
And no one does. No one wants... Whether they're tired, alcohol, prescription, any sort of prescription drug or illicit drug, if you're impaired, you're off the road.
Yeah, don't get behind the wheel.
Don't get behind the wheel.
I think everyone can agree with that sentiment and doesn't want to be at risk on the road. And then, so I guess with what we're calling for is to say remove this presence testing. I don't even necessarily think that it should just be for prescribed patients. Some people from marginalised communities especially who are at risk most to this legislation may not be able to afford to go see the doctor and pay the required fees just to get a prescription. Pretty much that's the only barrier of entry when it comes to getting medicinal cannabis, especially if you're already a consumer of cannabis.
That is an absolutely critical point you're raising there, Alec, isn't it? Like, basically we've legalised cannabis, but for the middle class.
Yep.
So if you're employed, you're middle class, you've got a good income, you can get medicinal cannabis in an hour online. Basically, you talk to a doctor, you say, for whatever reason, a whole range of reasons, you can talk to a doctor and say, I think medicinal cannabis will help me. You tell me, they say yes, and then you're basically prescribed medicinal cannabis, and it's in the mail and in your hand within sort of 48 hours. But you've got to have the wherewithal, and you've got to have the coin to do that, don't you?
Yep. 100%.
And so if you're unemployed, a single parent, lower socioeconomic, then that's because that process is expensive, isn't it?
It can be. If you don't know where you...
Or you don't have any money, it's expensive, isn't it?
If you don't have any money, then it's a barrier to entry. And then those companies aren't allowed to advertise. Regular GPs are probably a bit more hesitant to just go and prescribe, so there's specific companies that specialise in it and clinics that provide that. They usually charge you consultation fees, and they like to prescribe the medicines that they maybe have some other interests in, the type of medicine. So if you don't exactly know where to look, and these companies aren't allowed to advertise, then yeah, you might end up ringing up a place and going through a place that ends up costing you quite a lot more to where you may be able to get it elsewhere.
So consultation and all the rest is a couple $100, you know.
There is a lot of places where it can be cheaper, but yeah, there are also a lot of places that will charge you a few $100 just
and
to,
then
to
you've
go
got
through
to
the sign-up process.
and then you've got to buy your herb. You've got to buy your flour or your oils or whatever else it is, and that's a couple $100 as well.
Yeah.
So that's a barrier for people as well. So
yeah, and once you've done that, then you can carry it around wherever you like. You can consume anywhere that you're allowed to smoke, basically.
Yep.
You can basically do everything except drive and except grow it yourself.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's created a funny situation, hasn't it? Because just if you're a medicinal cannabis patient, you can spark up a joint anywhere that someone smoking a cigarette or vaping can.
Yep.
So my experience has been like I've been walking along the street now having a spliff, and people sort of look at you and go, "What are you doing? Like you're being, you're breaking the law." And people are just sort of getting used to it, aren't they? People smoking, like I know outside all the pubs now in inner Sydney, but you often smell people just having a spliff now. It's sort of just become normalised, hasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the education around it's growing. I think a lot of the population are realising that it's probably better than alcohol, and it's definitely better than smoking tobacco. Not that they're necessarily the same thing, but just if you're comparing apples and
I know so many people who just say, "Look, I have a spliff," and then even if they are drinking, they just don't drink as much.
Yep.
They just go, look, they have a little spliff and they'll have half a bottle of wine or 3 beers rather than drinking 8 beers or a whole bottle of wine or that sort of thing. It just and they find a sweet spot. Like I know so many, especially women, who just love the gummies and have like 2 of those or 1 of those. They titrate. They get the dose right, and they have 1 or 2 of those, a glass of wine, and that's it. And it's really cut down their drinking.
Yeah, and that's all they've needed to unwind and sort of mellow themselves out so they can get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, because I don't call
day.
Cannabis a recreation. It's not like volleyball or demolition derbies. I'm like, that's a hobby for sure. It's a relaxation. That's what people are doing. It's a relaxation, and yet that's medicinal. Everyone says, "Well, what do you want to do to de-stress?" Well, relax.
Yep.
Stress is a problem. Relaxing's the thing. So cannabis is one of those things people do to relax. They could go for a swim. They could, have a glass of wine, watch, just binge something on TV, have a spliff. It's just one of the things humans have always done to relax.
Yeah, and that's a big part of living a healthy lifestyle.
It sure is.
Yeah, having that balance. And so I'm of some of the same beliefs. So people talk about this medicinal versus recreational use, and it's like, well, no one really uses recreationally. Maybe they think they do.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they do, but I feel like no matter what, you can always bring it down to something that's maybe health related or whether that's mental or physical. But there's a reason that they're seeking that escape. There's a reason that they're wanting it. And even I guess as simple as just addiction for people that maybe should cut down on their consumption, but they're consuming a lot of cannabis. Addiction is a health issue as well, and so that can also, with the right guidance, can be treated, I guess, by a controlled, supervised supply, and as someone talking you through the process, and a bit like a therapist. Exactly,
and you're much better off having that in a legal framework, in a well-developed framework where there's a different approach for every different person because everyone's different. But if everything's done behind closed doors because it's illegal, well, you just don't have that. And young people aren't given the advice. That if you like young people, like I've seen literature, it basically says the people most at risk from smoking cannabis is if you're a heavy user under 15. Those people. If you're under 15 and you're using cannabis a lot, you should stop because it'll probably do you some harm long term. But we need to have those conversations out in the open about like what's misuse, what's use.
Well, I feel like legalising it would maybe somewhat make it less desirable for the young kids getting into it, because I think that some of the appeal from the younger generation to it is the fact that it's illegal and something that's a bit naughty and you're not meant to be doing.
Yeah, that's the attitude I've seen from young people. They go, "Oh, this is like boomers' back medication." You know, it's something they try and they go, "Well, look, it didn't." You know, let's be honest. Sometimes if you're blaze, it doesn't really get the party started. Everyone's kicked back,
going to sleep.
Everyone's having a snooze or just making a toasted cheese sandwich. But I could go and taste the cheese right now, thinking about that. But look, and that's the healthy way to do it. Now, what's not healthy is hanging out. Have we got the video up, Pete? Yeah, this is the Who Are We Hurting. So this was a campaign to raise awareness, first day at Parliament, of the Who Are We Hurting, and the campaign to driving with THC should not be a crime, the RDT. So it was really fantastically put together. Like, this is at 4 a.m. the decals are going on all the Humvees. Who are we hurting? There's me. There's you guys being maniacs in all your gear. Got the stretch limo with some no goods there. Some idiot. And we're on the telly. There, here we are. We're at Channel 9.
Yeah, and that's Lad Bible there following us along.
Lad Bible. And there we are again, menacing, and the Opera House. There we are. Me being an idiot and gibbering.
So I guess we're taking on the war on drugs that we didn't declare, but we're forced to now fight as consumers and as victims of the legislation. Just buying into that whole war on drugs scenario that legislation has put us up against.
There you go. There you go. You had that hat on. Here you are.
Oh, it was a bucket hat.
A bucket hat.
Yeah, we did. Will had the helmet.
He had the helmet. Down to Channel 10. Rolling up to Parliament. This is in the CBD in Sydney. People were genuinely worried. And there we are. Yeah, it was so well done, presenting the manifesto to all the different peeps. And, super clever, got massive amounts of attention. My first day, everyone was just going, "What is going on? Why is there a Humvee just patrolling, lapping the Parliament?" And it's such a creative, clever way to prank. What are stupid laws, aren't they, mate?
Without imposing on anyone. We don't want to be out there like some other protesters who block major highways and do different things. We're not there to negatively impact anyone. We just want to get the message out that there is support there for this cause. I guess most of the general public seem to agree to some degree. Pretty much everyone I meet wants to legalise cannabis. Most people I meet also want to fix the driving legislation. We're not there to impact on anyone. We just want to have some fun, get the message out there, cause a scene, get the story started, and get the conversation started through the media so it can reach more people. Have a bit of fun while doing it.
Well, you certainly do that. And I think that's a really powerful point you've just made there, that you can get your message out there without being sand in the gears of everyone. Like, you've seen some activists out there more recently and, blocking roads and disrupting people's lives as a key part of the protest, of basically saying, forcing themselves, they're perfectly within their rights to do that. And I've been part of lots of those sort of protests. But it's clearly going to alienate a big part of the community, especially those people who've, stuck in their cars or whatever it is, who've had their day disrupted. You really aren't hurting anyone with projecting a cannabis leaf. There's been all kinds of things projected onto the Sydney Opera House, some controversial. I think they've even done corporate things.
Yeah, they
haven't
use it as a bloody billboard for horse racing.
Yeah, that's right. They've got the horse racing and, like, you know, betting companies on there.
Yeah.
You got a dancing DACA leaf. You're not hurting anyone. That's a really clever way to get up your message. It's still, you know, gutsy, but you haven't put a whole heap of people offside.
Yeah, and I think that's an important factor when considering protests or activations or publicity stunts. Well, you don't want to get people offside, and some of those protests that do impact the day-to-day lives of people, some of those people that are then offside and not in support of it would otherwise support the message that you have and what the message you're trying to convey and the cause that you're fighting for. That's a very important thing that we consider and something that's factored in when we're coming up with new ideas. So that army convoy, that was last year's 420. Every 420 for weed's birthday, for the day synonymous with cannabis, we try and do something along those lines, whether it be the previous ones like the army convoy projecting on the Opera House, the King's Cross shop. There's been a heap of other ones too.
420, 20th of April in Australia here.
Yeah, and so we're pretty lucky too because we get to do it where we're in the date scenario, we're a day ahead of the US and other countries overseas. So we get to be the first ones to sort of kick things off and get a lot of coverage overseas as well, which isn't necessarily our focus because obviously we're trying to fix our laws and legislation here. But it is nice to just have that international support and to get the party started throughout the world. Because then America rolls on the following day, and then their 420's kicking off, so they get to wake up and read what's happened here in Australia and then get their party started.
Well, that's great to see. We're flying the flag. I saw you guys up at Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
And you had the Cannabis Cup, didn't you, up in Nimbin?
Well, I didn't hold it. I attended it. So there's the Cannabis Cup.
No, you didn't. You weren't holding the Cannabis Cup full of cannabis.
Yeah.
I'm not verbaling you there, bro. But tell us about that. So walk us through that. What happened there?
I guess it's as it's titled, the Cup. So it's a competition of cannabis. So it's all Australian, or pretty much all, I think, locally Australian grown.
Because internationally, it's just especially where it's legal, and even where it wasn't legal, it's a long held tradition. You know, best buds go up against each other, and you know it's a huge deal in the States. It's a big deal in Europe. You know, High Times has the best of the best. But in Australia, you know, you're basically kicking it off.
Well, it's still quite underground. So with that said, though, the Cannabis Cup itself has been going annually for as long as I've been alive up there in Nimbin. So they've, they had Jack Herer come back years and years ago.
Did they really?
Yeah, it was on 60 Minutes. I've reposted the clip
with
on
Michael
my
Balderstone and all the old heads up there.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
So Jack Herer was there, and that was, I don't even remember the year, but that was quite some time ago.
Probably
now.
in the 80s or something like that.
Yeah,
90s.
Probably around that. But yeah, so it's been happening annually. It's still underground, so it's a bit it can't grow to be what it could potentially be. But it's just a way for a lot of consumers to get together, a lot of producers to get together, compare their stuff, talk some crap with each other, and try and see who's got the most sought after product.
Oh my God, judging those things, like those weeds would be so strong, and I'd be useless after just the first sample. I'd just go the first one. I've got jelly legs, and now I'm going for a mango lassi. Wouldn't mind a mango lassi right now, actually. It's disappointing, isn't it? Like when I look at those things, how big a deal it is in the States, and Australia has got what I think is disappointing is that we've got this incredible cannabis culture that adds a lot to the community, adds a lot to the diversity. It's a big part of people's lives, and it just adds colour and movement. And when you go to Nimbin, it's just on display. It's that is a vibrant, happening town,
and it's bringing all walks of life together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really does. That's what you notice. There's a lot of people up there. There's, those old women who really are into like CBDs and, like with women's issues and sharing that medicine. And there's also the growers. And like there's some amazing cultivars of cannabis, grown in Australia that have been grown outdoors in like a lot of them in, like very hot and dry climates, which weed loves, but also those humid climates like northern New South Wales. So they've developed, some really amazing strains that are unique to Australia, and we'd be, well placed to share them with the world if we. I think that's one of the key things that has to happen with cannabis is when they legalise it, there's a grower amnesty. So all that. All those growers have been growing amazing weed up in the bush for like 30, 40, 50 years, can bring those strains out into the open and they'll be worth a fortune. Like just the IP on that stuff, won't they?
Yeah, I'd say so. So I guess along the lines of that topic, there's, in the early days at least, a lot of people who had a conviction relating to cannabis were, I guess, shunned away from the industry.
Yeah.
I think now it's the industry side of things are starting to realise that they're maybe the most knowledgeable and best people for the job.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely that as things progress, we need to make sure that those people that have that education and skill set, even though they may have been doing it illegally for some time, and may have convictions relating to it, that they're I guess not pushed to the side because they've got some of the best knowledge of the industry and of the plant and the product.
Yeah, well, they sure do. And like a huge issue with cannabis is mold with growing. It's just absolutely huge. So getting bud rot, mold, these types of things. There's this so much knowledge in Australia with outdoor growers, especially in those subtropical and tropical areas. I mean, imagine trying to grow weed in cans. People do, where there's meters of rainfall in the summer. People grow weed there, and they're like mold-resistant strains, and they've got strategies on how they do it. We're missing out on that knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment the way it is now with the medicinal market, we're tying up doctors and the medical system where it's unnecessarily tying them up. People aren't necessarily getting that help, like what we discussed a bit earlier about the good oversight of their consumption and I guess regulation and talk in terms of whether maybe they're over consuming and things like that. It's more of a just buy your stuff and get out kind of focus now because of the way things are being set up. So I definitely don't think the current system of medicinal is the be all or end all. That's definitely got a lot of improvement that can occur, and whether that be taking it out of the hands of doctors altogether and having it just done through the dispensary. I mean, I know a lot of suppliers that take a lot more care and for their patients and have much better insight than some of the advice provided by doctors themselves who don't necessarily understand cannabis or its uses. They only know what they've read or what's been promoted to them by the medication manufacturer, for example. And the way we have it then also with this black market side, there's a potential of it being supplied to kids, how you were saying before that they're the most impacted negatively if they're consuming heavily under 15. I mean, having it on the black market like this, like a lot of the talk where with vapes in Australia, I guess they're saying now it's being supplied to kids. It's like, well, if we legalised it and the tobacconists could sell it properly, like, you don't often see tobacconists selling cigarettes to kids, so that's probably a way to keep it away from them is if we weren't outlawing it completely.
And that's what's happened, isn't it, in Australia? Just they've just brought the guillotine down, couple of vapes you've got to buy from chemists, and the black market's just gone absolutely bananas.
Yeah, and now you can basically get it everywhere so long as no one's burnt your tobacconist down yet.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other big problem, is now they're driving cars into them and setting them on fire because it's a big criminal market. And so,
and it's just happened overnight in Australia. You've just gone from no like black market or very small black market to just this absolute explosion, and the violence has come straight away.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly as we've seen with like cannabis and other illicit drugs. They've just handed it all over to the black market, and now, especially in Melbourne and places, you see every day.
Well, that's moving. That's coming to Sydney and Queensland now, so it's spread across the east coast. But yeah, wherever there's demand, there's going to be supply, and then there's going to be when it's illegal, there's going to be the violence and the unsavoury types that come with it. And so, not just with vapes, with tobacco and cigarettes, they've kept increasing the tax. So now there's a lucrative market for illegal cigarettes that come, just your Manchester packs, your unbranded packs.
And you see those everywhere.
They're everywhere.
There's like billions of them.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who smokes the tax stuff. They're all smoking the untaxed illegal products. So that's just contributing to black market as well. That's the government's not getting any tax revenue from it. So they got too greedy, and whether it was greed or they were actually trying to stop people consuming, it hasn't worked. There is that demand, and now that supply has been filled, our borders obviously aren't tight enough to be able to implement something like that.
I mean, they say that they can check our borders, but like those shows,
they're obviously not.
They can't. Like with the amount of freight coming in,
Yeah.
There's no way that they can stop a container of they just don't seem able to stop any of the illicit drugs. The coke, meth, all of these ones. And now they've added vapes and tobacco to it.
Yeah, which aren't as easily concealed.
Yeah, I know. And it's coming in bales and, it's just a case study in prohibition. Just flip the dial to prohibition, and you've just created, super rich gangsters who are prepared to do all kinds of stuff to protect their patch, protect these rivers of gold.
Yep.
It's an argument I have with the Premier all the time, and anyone policymaker. I just say, you're handing billions of dollars over to these people who only really give a shit about one thing, that's making coin.
Yeah, 100%. And then that's also where the quantity over quality element comes into it, with what we were talking about before with the PGRs and lower quality cannabis.
And also when it comes to vapes, what we're seeing in New South Wales is some really, really terrible stuff in the vapes, like nitazines, opiates, and stuff like that. So, like in these fake cannabis vapes, in other vapes, just your regular vapes, in various drugs, there's no purity. You just got no idea what you're really having. And some of the stuff in these opiates, they do kill people and will kill people. So.
That's the problem with when you black market something, you've got no regulation. It's the same as when we talk about the cannabis. You don't necessarily know what's in it. Now, with cannabis, I don't necessarily think that's a gateway drug, but I think the criminality, so the criminal side of it, is potentially a gateway to further criminality. So if you're a younger type and cannabis starts helping you, then you might start to question, well, if this is illegal and this is actually good for me and helping me, what else am I being lied to in terms of legislation? What other crimes aren't necessarily that bad for me and maybe good for me too? And that's not necessarily a good way to think. And then you've got people on the supply side of things, and it's like, well, okay, I'm doing this. If I get robbed, I can't go to the police and say, hey, my house has just been robbed, all this has been stolen. I'll go get a gun. I'll just level up the level of criminality.
And that's what we see across Sydney, isn't it?
Yeah, these are good people that otherwise wouldn't be involved in any crime. This is now serving as a gateway onto worse stuff, really.
Yeah, because people have got to have protection. Like if you've got to grow, someone could turn up and threaten you and say, with a gun, and that happens. But
try to take your life, or you've got to defend what you're doing and your livelihood, and it's just
and then
a snowball of negative effects.
Yeah, and then those people have got to bring in, and you see they bring in people who basically enforce and protect their businesses and what they're doing, and then it creates downward spiral. And the other thing I always say is, if you make cannabis illegal, people will go to someone who sells illegal drugs.
Yep.
And then that person is probably more likely to sell other drugs as well.
Yeah. Well, now they're around it. They've got a supply and availability of it, which they otherwise wouldn't have had. And then, if they're going through a rough patch or have the wrong influences around them, or the supplier is pushing the wrong stuff and just looking to make a buck, that could spiral into worse stuff.
Yeah, and then someone ends up on meth or something like that, and and that's a total disaster, and something's just got to be avoided. Now, it's 2025. We're in an election year. What you got? You're cooking anything up for 420 this year?
A few ideas. We've got to sort of knuckle down and work out exactly what we're doing.
Don't give the game away, mate, because that's the whole trick, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely don't want the protest division trying to come up with any ways to shut us down early. But hopefully we'll continue it. I think this year will be the 10th year of Who Are We Hurting and the 420 activations consecutively. Hopefully we can come up with something good.
Well, if I can help in any way, mate, just let me know. And I'm looking forward to Nimbin this year. We the Legalised Cannabis Party. We're marching in the Mardi Gras for the first time this year, which is good. We're going to be out
Sydney Mardi Gras.
Yeah, Sydney Mardi Gras. We're marching in that, which is a big deal for us. We're a new political party. It's a hard thing to get a gig in, so that we've got a big float in that, and we'll be flying the flag for reform there. And then the Mardi Gras, the 5th of May. It's 5th of May, isn't it, Pete?
Yeah, first weekend of May.
First weekend of May, which is coming up, which I'll see you at in the Cannabis Cup, which is fantastic. And in between we've got 420, 20th of April. So look, Alec, you're a powerhouse of creativity. You've been relentless, and you've done, I think, as much as anyone in this country to really put common sense cannabis laws front and centre in the country, mate. So, total champion. And it is, I want to raise one thing lastly, is it's a cost of living thing too, isn't it? If people could just grow their own weed, we're going towards an election, but if people could grow their own weed, a couple of plants in their backyard, that would save them thousands and thousands of dollars a year, wouldn't it? If you could grow your own medicine.
Yeah, 100%. Whether they're consuming medicinal or black market, it could definitely save the money. And now it's not obviously not viable for everyone to grow their own, but there are a lot of people that would rather do it. I think the idea of cannabis clubs where you could join up to a group of people where if you're not necessarily able to grow yourself or in your own premises, that you can maybe do it as a bit of a community effort. But yeah, there's a big cost of living factor associated with it all, and then all of the negatives that come from the illegal side. So if like we said, the marginalised communities are most at risk of being prosecuted for cannabis consumption or possession. That's just pushing them further back and creating more barriers of entry for them to assimilate into society properly. If they're unemployed, it makes it harder for them to gain good employment. I guess there's a lot of negatives that come from the legislation that currently exists.
There sure is, and it affects a lot of people in this country. People always say, that cannabis is a left-wing issue or something like that, but it's across demographics, across voter type, demographics, age, city and country. It's the most widely consumed illicit drug. It is a big issue for millions of Australians, and so you've been a really powerful advocate for that, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do this year. It's always hilarious, and so everyone, make sure you check out the Craze Collective and the work that they've done over many, many years, being merry pranksters, getting out there and in a really light-hearted but really powerful message, taking the message to the streets, and I'm looking forward to that again, and I'm looking forward to more smash-up derbies, mate, because that looks like so much fun.
It's good fun.
I'm surprised you're not into the monster trucks. Maybe this year a monster truck. through the
Yeah.
city or something like that.
Yeah, maybe we can look into something like that. But thank you for everything you do as well. I mean, with everything we're doing, if we don't have people in Parliament and proposing more sensible legislation and legislation amendments, then it's all in vain. We can get as much support as we like, but at the end of the day, people need to vote for politicians such as yourself, actually get them in power, show the other politicians that, hey, they're losing votes to this. I mean, it's crazy that a single policy party can now be elected to Parliament because of how strongly a lot of the population feel about this specific issue. So I think that's a big wake-up call to a lot of other parliamentarians who are asleep at the wheel, pardon the pun, when it comes to the driving problems. But yes, so it's really important what you guys are doing. It's really important that we vote more of your colleagues in and have more power in Parliament. Hopefully, you guys can get someone in federally, and we can make some national change.
Well, mate, that's very nice of you to say. Really appreciate it. Look, our whole movement, the party's built off 50, 60 years of activism.
Yep.
And so there's a huge base there. And this year's a big year for us, 2025. We've got an election in WA where we're looking to get a couple of people elected there. We've got a great MP over there, Brian Walker. And we've got fantastic candidates lining up for the Senate around the country as we head towards the federal election. But it's like we're the fastest growing political party in Australia. It's a huge social movement. When you've got, sports people like Andrew Johns and the late Olivia Newton-John and politicians getting elected to Parliament and all these advocates like yourself from, all parts of society, grassroots, be it up in the North Coast or the suburbs of Sydney, everyone's, recognised this is an area that needs reform. You've been an absolute champion at raising that in a really clever way. Craze Collective. Again, check their shit out. Alec Zammitt, thanks for coming into the weeds, mate, and we'll see you on 420.
No worries. Thanks for having me. And I'm coming to party at Mardi Gras and Mardi Gras.
See you then, bro.